All right, welcome back to this fantastic mini course about instant understanding, where you're going to get faster learning, immersive comprehension, quicker remembering, dynamic thinking, and a whole lot more. So we're on chapter 2 of here, and what we're talking about is how this course is different. So what's different about this course? We fill in the missing step that you didn't learn in reading, and we'll talk about who am I to build this course? Like, why listen to me? So the first thing that's different about this course is we examine how different reading techniques use different parts of your brain. When you were learning to read, all you did was say the words out loud and get comprehension quizzes and then kept it moving. Nobody taught you, what the different parts of your brain do and how you can understand those different parts of your brain and use them for better study techniques. We also focus on the subjective experience of understanding. So instead of just saying, hey, here's the brain region, we're going to talk to you about from the inside of you being in the world, how your experience is crafted and controlled by those brain regions. So hey, when I'm doing this type of thing, this brain region is firing off. So when we say, hey, this brain region does X, Y, and Z, and you want to create some practice or get better at it, you know how to do that from the subjective thing rather than it being some brain region in somebody else, right? So we're going to also talk about how your brain is kind of like a computer. You tap stuff on the keyboard and you move the mouse, and then there's stuff happens on the display. So just, in a similar fashion, you do stuff in your brain and it comes up in your visualizations, your auditory, what you say to yourself and the sounds you hear. You might be playing music to yourself. You might be imagining yourself doing jumping jacks or some type of race. So, how your brain processes the information and then presents it to you in a unified manner. We're going to talk about comprehension and understanding, not necessarily reading and remembering, which a lot of other courses focus on. And we're even going to get into what parts of speech do to create experiences in your brain. And we already told you the big secret up front that understanding happens in the parietal lobe in your brain. So we're not going to take anything and make you wait. We're just going to plow right through and make sure you get everything you need. All right, so we're going to fill in the missing steps. So we have lectures here, we have online video learning, and that's a small picture, but she's reading. So you could be in class, you could be doing studying later, and all of these things. And then what happens is you get information, right? And then what happens is you understand it or you comprehend it. And everybody's like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, do they understand or comprehend it? Here's a test. Here's a quiz. And there's not a lot of there's not a lot of teaching about how to correct what people misunderstand or how to prevent misunderstanding by using metaphors, using different teaching aids and so forth. Now, of course, there is instructional design where teachers learn how to present information in the best way possible, but that's not necessarily always based on the perspective of the learner. We have different learning modalities like visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, but those are just how you receive the information, not what the information is turned to in your brain, which is what we are talking about with instant understanding. And then usually what happens is we skip the middle step and then we go into taking notes. So people have different note-taking abilities, and you talk about sketch notes and mind maps, and then you have spaced repetition. But what happens if you didn't understand it in the first place? Right, sure, you have a conceptual mind map that talks about all of the labels, but if you can't run a simulation in your head that approximates or predicts reality, do you really understand it? All right. And who am I to build this course? Like I mentioned earlier, I took a speed reading course in 1996. That's probably before most of you were born. So I was blazing through many, many books, right? So it got so bad or great that I was ravaging Interlibrary alone, and I got to the end of Lycos, which was a very early search engine, and I actually didn't get to the end of it. That's just kind of funny. So with the Interlibrary alone, I would go and find the books in the syllabuses that I had, and I would go read. I would find the books, and then I would read the bibliographies of those books and figure out if there was anything I was interested in. So if the library that I had didn't have it, I would go to the interlibrary loan department and get that on loan from another library around the country. It could be a collegiate library or it could be a public library. And so, in the beginning of every semester, I'd get maybe 5 or 6 books, and every couple of weeks, 5 or 6 different books, just so I can read them to understand the information that I was presented better. So what I did with my speed reading course, instead of just taking it and getting better grades, I took it and I learned a whole lot more. I'd argue with, have heated discussions with the professors and so forth. Now, there was this one time where I was at home on probably like a Christmas break, and everybody says you want to clear your register and listen to music that doesn't have any vocals to it, because then your auditory brain would be processing them and not the words that you're reading. And one day I put on this jazz artist called Gershwin, and he had a lot of stuff that I kind of remembered and a lot of stuff that I didn't, but I didn't know why it sounded familiar. So I was listening to it, and I remember getting to this one paragraph, and I had no idea what it said. And I read it 7 times. And I had to pause because, listen, how was I doing fine? And then I couldn't read. And then I went back at it, and I could read again. And maybe 20 minutes later, I had the same problem. And that happened, I read for maybe 2 or 3 hours that day. And maybe about the 3rd time around, I was like, okay, it's the song. I know this song. And something's happening in my brain. So, part of my speed reading course, we had a little bit of meditation to help us, take a nap or go to sleep. And so, sat down and slowed my breathing pattern to understand what was going on. Because when this song came on, something was happening in my brain, but I didn't understand what it was. And it took me a couple of minutes. And what I realized was I was watching Tom and Jerry cartoons. So Gershwin was a composer, and he wrote stuff, and then they created Tom and Jerry cartoons to the beat of his stuff. So the times where I couldn't read anything, what was happening is that was either a part of the song or a song where it was associated with these Tom and Jerry cartoons. I mean, you can tell that they're super violent. So what was happening is I couldn't read because the music had me making these pictures. And that was my critical insight into understanding what was going on with the reading and, all of the motion happening. I couldn't read and watch these videos all at the same time. So what I did was I turned the music off, and then I could read fine. I went back to the paragraph. I picked it up like that. And so, I would found a couple other Gershwin CDs and found different songs to different episodes. And I would play them, see if I could read, and then I would stop, and then I could read. It was wild. So this was the beginning of my critical insight, right? That's we're down here. Cool. So what I then did was I went and I kind of stopped for a semester or two doing the extra reading class. And I studied education, psychology, therapy, the brain, mind, consciousness, anything that had to do with subjective experience. And I just started reading everything about it in order to understand this and to see if anybody else had this particular insight. And sadly, no. Graduated. I was a lifeguard for a while. I taught high school and elementary school. I did software training. I was a leadership coach. So I got used to getting up in front of people and teaching them stuff that they needed to learn. I got married. I had kids. I got fat. I'm working on that. Doing a little exercising these days. And, somewhere around, I started retiring from reading business, science, and history. And I started reading science fiction and fantasy. Just to let you know, I got a degree in history. And during the summers and whenever I was reading about business and science. So it wasn't just education, psychology, therapy, brain, mind, and consciousness. It was also, a whole lot of other popular science things about network theory, quantum physics, et cetera, right? And now I'm back. So what I want to do is I want to bring all of this to everybody else. Here's a little thing of John Wick. That's my guy. No, I will not get violent. Well, anyway, so how this course is different. What's different about this course is we focus specifically on comprehension and understanding, whereas a lot of courses on reading, memory, and note taking, speed reading specifically, memory, note taking, they just kind of assume that you understand the material. We fill in the missing step. We talk about how your understanding is based on what happens in your parietal lobe. And I discussed who am I to build this course. So you got a little background to figure out, what got me into speed reading in the first place, or, when I started speed reading in the first place, and then, what I experience that differentiates a normal speed reading course with this one. So my experience that said, okay, this wasn't working. So I figured out why it wasn't working. And then I figured out why it did work. And now I can tell you why it does work. So thanks for playing. Again, this is the course Instant Understanding. And pretty soon you'll be heading up the next chapter.